Okay, hello students. Today we will continue with our last session, right? So what we have covered in last session. Let's have a recap with that, right? So we have started the van design, right? So in that we will discuss about planning and the designing phase, like the PPDIOO model we have. In this also we need to do the planning and designing according to that particular model itself, right? Then we have also seen the application requirement for that particular van designing, right? So response time, downtime, and all that, whatever the requirement with respect to that we already seen that. Then the technical requirement in terms of the whatever the maximum traffic you are going to offer, and with respect to the bandwidth, right? So optical fiber cable, with respect to the transmission media, right, which you are going to use, right? So depending upon that, the bandwidth requirement can be checked in this particular technical requirement is concerned, right? And then we are also seeing that particular evaluating the cost effectiveness of that van ownership, right? So in that also we have seen there are also certain equipment, there are certain things which already over there, and which will be required that particular fixed cost over there, right? And from that is nothing but that particular decide the ownership of that particular van, right? And how whatever the requirement you need to specify, right, that must be available with that particular owners of that particular van, right? Then the optimizing the bandwidth of a van, right? So there are some technique via which you can optimize the bandwidth, right? For example, the bandwidth compression is there, bandwidth combination is there. Then some queuing mechanism you are going to use for improving link utilization, right? So from that also this particular bandwidth can be optimized, right? And some conjunction avoidance also you have done. With the help of that also the bandwidth you can be optimized, right? So and after that we are also started with this particular using WAN technologies, right? So in that we have discussed about this particular remote access. There are some measures for this particular remote access, right? And after that we also discussed the VPN, what are the different features of VPN, what are the different types of VPN, what are the different applications of VPN, right? We have discussed about all these things, right? So today we will start with our this particular WAN backup, right? So these 2 points we have remained in our last session because of the time limit, right? So in this WAN backup we will start in from the today's lecture, right? So let's go with that WAN backup strategies, right? So if you see what are the various the big backup options are available for the this particular WAN, right? So backup is nothing but for you can take it as an alternative path for your remote access, right? If you're concerned, right? And how it can be get it, right? So you can use some combination of certain reliability or the speed that or the high importance of that particular WAN links, right? Will be which will give you the high reliability and high availability, right? So whatever the branch offices you will be used to in your existing infrastructure, right? So if you experiencing some minimum downtime in case of any primary link failure, right? So at that time this particular backup connection will be established, right? And either we have a dial-up connection or by using some of the permanent connections, this particular WAN backup can be work in that case, right? So if you see here, so there are 3 options over here, right? The first one is dial-up backup routing option is there. Then the permanent secondary WAN link will be there, and the third one is the shadow PVC is there, right? So we will see one by one, right? So what happened in this particular WAN backup options, right? So if you see the first one, that is dial backup routing, right? So it is nothing but one way of that particular using this particular dial-up service for the backup purpose, right? So in this scenario, if you see the switch circuit network, right? So that is the one traditional WAN technology which we already seen, right? So that will provide all this particular backup service for another type of the circuit, right? So we can call it as an point to point, or we can call it as an frame relay for that, right? And this particular router will initiate all this dial-up backup line when it will be detects any kind of the failure for your primary circuit, right? And after that this particular dial dial-up will provide you the WAN connectivity between until whenever the primary circuit will be restored, right? And at that time this particular dial-up routing connection dial-up routing connection can be terminated whenever the primary circuit will be restored, right? So in this way, this particular dial-up backup routing will be used in the as a WAN backup option, right? And if you talk about this particular permanent secondary WAN, right? So if the additional permanent WAN link you will be deploying, right? So this particular WAN link in between the each remote offices and the central offices, for example, right? So so it will be having some more fault tolerant, right? And it will be gives you two main functionality, right? The first one is it will provide a backup link over there, and also it will be gives you an bandwidth also increases, right? So how it will provides a backup link, first of all we will see, right? Though, so backup link which will be we can use in whenever the primary link of that which will be connecting that particular remote offices or the central offices will be failed, right? In that case this particular backup link we will be using, right? And routers will automatically route that particular failed WAN links by using some floating static routes, right? Or any routing protocol, for example EIGRP, OSP, or so. These are nothing but your dynamic routing protocols, right? So so if one link is failed, right, so this particular router will recalculate all this weight and then send all the traffic through another link, right? So it will be very much useful in that to provide a backup to that particular permanent secondary WAN is concerned, right? And if I am going to talk about in this particular increased bandwidth, then if you see when the both primary and the secondary link can be used simultaneously, right? Because they are permanent, right? And the routing protocol which automatically perform the load balancing in between these two parallel links, right? With which having some equal cost, right? So therefore the resulting increase the bandwidth, right? And it will be decreases obviously the response time as well, right? So therefore it is nothing but one advantage of this by using this particularly permanent secondary link side by side, or we can use as simultaneously, right? Because it is an permanent we can use, and therefore the routing protocol also perform load balancing in between these two, right? So therefore the bandwidth also increases, and because of the bandwidth increasing the response time is also decreases, right? So if you see in this particular figure also, right, so the connection is in between the enterprise edge and the remote sides, right? So which will be used a permanent primary and the secondary WAN link, right, for the redundancies part, right? So already we have studied that particular redundancy part, right? The link redundancy, route redundancies, port redundancies, and all that thing, right? So in that if you see in this particular diagram also, so we have an primary and secondary WAN link for the redundancy part, right? And if any routing protocol, for example EIGRP, if you use in this particular topology, right, you should be support the load balancing over here for the unequal paths, right? Where the other packet or per destination basis it will be used, and it will be increased the utilization of this particular backup link, right? So this is nothing but one of you can call it as an usage of this particular permanent secondary WAN link, if this particular diagram if you are concerned, right? So then the concept comes is the shadow PVC, right? So with the help of this particular type, right, we can also maximum load on that particular shadow PVC, right, which will be not exceed to a certain range or certain rate, right? So whenever the primary PVC is available, right, the service provider which will be using that particular secondary PVC without any additional charge, right? So it must be provide all the secondary PVC to you without additional any charge, so that you can be maintain some redundancies over there, and the traffic limit which will be for the shadow PVC, right, is exceeded, because while the primary PVC is running in the state, right, the service provider will be charged for you the excess load on that particular shadow PVC, right? So if you see in this particular diagram also, right, so a redundant connection in between the remote side and the enterprise edge will be there by using some of the shadow PVC over here, right? and which will be offered by this particular service provider, right? Because of the potential of this particular additional cost, and the router must avoid sending unnecessarily data, right, over this particular shadow PVC, right? So this particular thing we have used in this particular as a concept of the shadow PVC and the service provider line concept, right? Then we will see the internet as a WAN backups technology if we concern, right? So whenever alternative options will be failed for your WAN connection, right? So this type of the connection is considered as best effort, right? So which does not have guarantee for you for the bandwidth, right? Therefore some common methods will be used for private network, right, over a public IP network, right? So if you see there are I have listed here the IP routing without constraint, GRE tunnels, IPsec tunnels, right? So we will see one by one how it will be work, right? So for example, if you concern this particular IP routing without constraint, right? So without constraint, when relying on your if you are relying on the internet, right, to provide a backup for your branch offices, right? So whatever the company which will be cooperate with that particular internet service provider, right, and announce it is their network, right? So this particular the backup network, right, or internet we can call, right, it will be becomes aware of all the company's data because it is sent unencrypted, right? So all your organization's data on your on the internet will be available publicly, right, to over their particular ISPs, right? So on that particular part, the layer 3 tunneling with GRP and IPsec we are going to use, right? So if you see the IP network, or the connect two IP networks right, on a backbone of IP network, right? So possibly it will be hide all the IP addressing which will be having the two networks from the backbone of that particular IP network, right? So if you see in GRE tunnels, right, so if you see in this particular GRE part, right, the protocol which will be developed by Cisco, right? So this GRE is a protocol which will be developed by the Cisco, right, which encapsulate the variety of packet types inside their IP tunnel, right? So this GRE is designed with the purpose of that generic tunneling of protocol can be done, right? So it will be tunnels IP over IP protocol, right? So which can be useful for building a small scale VPN network, right? And it will be very much helpful in flexible deployment of basic IP over the VPNs as well, right? So that's why by using GRE tunnels you can back up the links on several sites, right? So in GRE encapsulation also will be helpful in this particular GRE tunnels, if you see, right? And if you talk about this particular IPsec tunnel, right, so it is a thing about your tunnel encapsulation protocol also, and your security protocol also, right? So in IPsec, which will be provide security for the transmission of sensitive information, right, over the unprotected network, right? For example, if you see the internet, right, so it is nothing but unprotected network, right? So it will be gives the security for that particular sensitive information on that particular internet part, right? And how it will be performed, it will be gives you security by encrypting all the tunnels data, right? So IPsec can be act as a network layer in that particular tunneling or transport mode, and protects and authenticate all the IP packets in between this particular IPsec devices, right? So all the security features, for example, the data confidentiality, then data integrity, then data authenticity, right? So automatic reply to all these things, then easy deployment, right? So all these things are nothing but the features of this particular IPsec, as which will be already used in this particular backup techniques, right? And if you see in this particular diagram, right, that will be talked about the backup GRE tunnel over a public IP network, right? So this is here if you see there are two non-contiguous network which we are connected over the point-to-point logical link, right, with a backup implemented over the IP network, right? So if you see here, it will be used here the GRP IP tunnel, right? so this is nothing but grp ip tunnel from which backup will be implemented over the ip network, right? Such tunnels which we are configured in between the source router and the destination router, right? So if you see here the source router and the destination router, in between I have uses this particular backup GRA tunnel, right? And which will be it will be visible as interfaces on each router, right? So this will be data can be forwarded across the tunnel is already formatted in a packet, right? And it can be encapsulate that particular standard IP packet header, right? And this particular packet will be encapsulate with a new GRE header, and then it will be placed into this particular tunnel, right? And obviously with the destination IP address, it will be set to the this particular tunnel's endpoint, right? And that is nothing but your the next hope, right? And whenever that particular GRE packet will be reaches to this particular endpoint, right, this particular GRE header will be stripped away, and that particular packet will be continuous to be forwarded at your destination point, right? So this is nothing but all the process of this particular GRE per tunnel over the public IP network. That's how this particular backup techniques can be used in this particular thing, right? So this is our internet as a WAN backup technique, right? So if you we will have some next topic now. Okay, so now let's start with next topic, that is our enterprise edge WAN and MAN architecture, right? So in this we will cover this particular enterprise edge WAN and MAN consideration, right? So what aspect you need to consider while giving your the edge WAN and the MAN network, right? And also there are some different technologies with respect to MAN and WAN architecture, right? So that also we are going to see. Okay, so first of all we will go with the enterprise edge WAN and MAN considerations, right? So what points you need to be considered while designing enterprise edge for with respect to the WAN is concerned, right? So if you see the first one, that is nothing but the support for the network growth, right? So so you know already the enterprise which we or the organization, right, that anticipate significant growth will be there whenever you choose a different kind of the technology, right, that allows for the network also to grow, right, with their businesses, right? So therefore this particular WAN technologies which we are seen in our last session, right? So all these technologies with high support for that particular network growth make it possible to add new branches, or you can add a new remote offices with that particular minimal configuration at existing site to that particular organization, right? And therefore it will be minimizing the cost and the IT staff requirement for that particular changes or that particular upgradation, if we can consider, right? And all these WAN technologies whatever we have studied, right, the traditional one and other one as well, right? So all these are with giving the lower support for that particular network growth, right, which will be require significantly more time if you consider, and efforts as well as for with respect to the cost also to expand that particular kind of the network, right? So obviously it will be support for our network growth. So whichever the technology you are going to see, you are going to select for that particular organization, right? So it will be depending and it will be responsible for high support of that particular network growth, right? And it will be also adding the growth to your businesses, right? Like you can add a new branches, or you can add a different kind of the remote server remote offices with your that particular existing sites whatever you have with your organization, right? So at minimal configuration you can add all these things, right? So that's why it is nothing but a very good opportunity and very good aspect or a very good consideration if you see with respect to the WAN and the MAN, right? So it will be a support for your network growth, right? Yeah. Then the second one, if you see the appropriate availability, right? So as you know that for any kind of the organization, we have an various types of the critical applications over there, right? So obviously the businesses or organizations, right, so which having which running or which we are moving forwards, right, which heavily affected by some even the smallest disturbance in the that particular network communication if take place, right? So because it will be highly affected to their high availability of that particular organization's network as well, right? So it will be a very much important characteristics when if you are choosing any kind of the network connectivity technology, right? So you need to you need to check first of all what are the different critical applications you have, right? And what are the number of users are going to affect if your network connectivity will be hampered, right? So that you need to kept in mind always while first whenever you are going to design any kind of the enterprise age WAN and MAN network, right? The highly available technologies, right, which will be provide all the inherent redundancies, right? So where there will be no any single point of failure will be exist in your kind of the network, right? Then which will if you see the lower availability technology, right, which will be dynamically recover from the network distribution, right, in a short time period, right? So that can be also you can check for to in your organization, right? But if minor distribution if it is there, right, then it will be too costly for some of the kind of the businesses, right? Therefore this particular technologies whatever we have seen, right, that you need to check for which technology is giving you the high availability, right? So that will be you can use in your kind your organization, and it can be reduces or minimize the loss which you will which you will be having with for that distribution in that particular connectivity or that particular network part, right? And by using the product which having some redundant characteristics also you can use for this particular multiple WAN connections, right? And also you can use that particular backup power supplies for that particular WAN technologies also, right? So this will be you can do to incorporate high availability into your organization for that particular kind of the WAN network, right? So because if you see nowadays the applications which will be are uses by the different kind of the organization that are nothing but the critical applications, right, that must be run on the 24/7 by 365 days, right? And if something minor also can be happen, then it will be hamper their millions of the it will cost their millions, right, in millions, right? So that's why this particular appropriate availability should be you need to consider while designing enterprise age WAN and the MAN network, right? Then the third one is if you see the operational expenses, right? So some of the WAN technologies, right, which will be result a high cost, right, than others, right? So if you see whatever the traditional WAN technologies also we have seen a different other technologies also, right? So from that if you calculate the cost for each and every WAN technologies, right, then you will understand that there are some WAN technologies are there which will be costing higher than some of the having the lower cost, right? So this technology we can call as for example the frame relay or for example the ATM, right? So these typically will be higher carrier fees they have, right, service fees they have, and than a technology such as if you see the technology like IPsec based IP VPN, right, which takes advantage of that public internet to help reduce cost, right? So that's why this particular technology having reduced cost as compared to your frame relay or ATM, right? So you can use such a type of the technology into to reduce your cost, right? So it is important to note whenever you are migrating to a different particular technology, right, you need to also check for the reducing carrier fees whatever they are charging to you, right? So you need to again consider alternative ways how it can be reduce, or how what are the different alternatives to this particular technology, right? Then you need to also while selecting all these things, right, you need to also consider the what are the different network performances and QoS parameters of this particular transporting technology, or generic technologies, whichever you are going to use, right? And also you need to check that whether this particular advanced technology is what we can call it will be having support for your voice and videos or not, right? Because now if you say, if you wanted to do a future expansion of your organization, right, the services which you are required, that is nothing but your voice and the video in this future, right? So as respect to the future expansion, right, you need to think upon on this particular advanced technologies as well, right? So these are nothing but with respect to your operational expenses you need to think upon while designing enterprise edge WAN and the MAN network, right? Then the next one is the operational complexity, right? If you see the what is the Cisco MAN and the WAN technologies, right, which will having some varying levels of inherent technical complexities, right? So that these particular levels are of technical expertise required within that particular enterprise also varies, right? Because if you see some of the whatever whoever will managing that particular MAN and WAN technologies, right, it must be a skillful, right? It must be a technical expertise he must having, right? And for that purpose this particular because if you see here in a MAN and the WAN, the businesses can upgrade is upgraded now in itself, right? And this advantage of this particular expertise will be useful in that particular organization itself, right? For example, if your expertise of the existing IT staff, whoever it is in there in that particular organization, right, or any staff which having some already the knowledge but requires some minimal training for that, right? So when an enterprise wants to maintain that particular greater control, right, for that particular network, by taking on this responsibility, right, which will be usually gone by the service provider, right? And this particular extensive IT training could be required to successfully deploy and manage this particular WAN technologies, what we are seen from the last 2 to 3 sessions, right? So these particular WAN technologies aspects and advantages, disadvantages, cost and features and functionality, right, all these things you must know for this particular operational complexities as well, right? Then we have then voice and video support, right? So as I will already discuss it in our operational expenses also, right? So most of the Cisco MAN and WAN technologies, right, which will be supporting QoS parameters, right, or which will be having which will be has to enable advanced applications, right? For example, voice and over video over the network, right? Or in case of some WAN technology can use a service provider with a Cisco certified multi-service IP VPN, right? And all these Cisco's products, if they are going to use, right, because it's having some adequate level of QoS parameters, right, and it will also assuring you for the support of voice and the video traffic, right? So for example, if in this case in case where the public internet is used, right, in a WAN connection, right, and QoS cannot always be a guaranteed, right? Because if you use the high bandwidth broadband connection, right, it may require for that purpose, right? For small offices if you concern, teleworker if you concern, remote centers if you concern, right, that must be used this particular voice and video communications. And nowadays if you see for the future expansion or the any kind of the future strategies you wanted to incorporate in your organization, right? So that must be having some voice and video support, right? Because if you're having that in the starting phase only, right, then there will be no much cost when you are going to upgrade all these things, right? Because there will be no need for major upgradation you will require for your organization if you having all these things as early phases, right? Then the next one is effort and equipment cost to migrate from the private connectivity, right? So whenever the enterprise is migrating from the private connectivity to any other technology which we are mentioned as a transport, different van transport technologies, right? So it is very much important in that case to evaluate all the short term and the long term costs and the benefit of the migration, right? For example, if you see in the cloud also, right? So cloud migration, if you wanted to do, right, then for example, if you wanted to shift from one cloud to one cloud provider to another cloud provider, right? So in that case also you need to think upon, or you need to evaluate certain things, right? So for example, what is the short term cost and the long term cost, and what are the different benefits for that by doing, if you are doing the migration, right? So in many cases this will be the minimal investment in equipments, and that minimal equipment investment in the time and the IT staffing will be required, right? And in some cases, however, the migration will be required for the only a short term investment, right? So not only the new equipment, but also in the IT training also you need to check what is the what will the cost, right? Because if you see in investment might also provide you the long term investment like cost saving and the lower operational expenditure, and it will be obviously impact on your increased productivity also, right? So this particular equipment cost and this particular private connectivity also for the whatever that IT training you are going to provide for your staff, right? In that case also this will be expenditures, and will be very very much important if you concern with respect to the designing of enterprise edge WAN and the MAN network, right? Then the next one is the network segmentation support, right? If you see network segmentation means what, the supporting we can support a single network that will be logically segmented, right? And if you see the advantage of this network segmentation is that it reduces the expenditure which will be associated with the equipment and the maintenance, right? So therefore in the network administration, or if you see in the network carrier, whichever the charges if you see as compared to your separate physical networks, right? So it will be having some another advantage, that is it will be increase the security also, right? Because if you see the segmentation which can be helped to isolate all the department and all the it can be limit your partners, for example, right, to access all the corporate networks, right? So network segmentation if you do, right, so it will be very much useful for you for your isolation part. If you do if you require some troubleshooting, then that also it will be help you, right? And so it will be reduces your expenditure which will be you are if you are spending on your equipment and the maintenance part, right? So it will be easy for as with respect to your edge WAN and the WAN network kind of the thing, right? Then we will move toward this particular Cisco enterprise MAN and WAN architecture technologies, right? So here there are some technologies are there with respect to MAN and WAN, right? So if you see here, the private WAN is the ISP service is there side to side, and the remote access IPsec VPN is there. Then service provider MPLS and IP VPN is there. Then self deployed MPLS is there, right? So we will see one by one each of this particular MAN and WAN architecture technologies, right? So if you see the in private WAN, right, so private connectivity will be takes the advantage for the existing frame relays, ATM, or whatever we have seen as different kind of the transport technologies, right? So it will be provide additional level of security when we are connected to any kind of the site or any kind of the thing with the strong encryption part, right? Those strong encryption if you see we will have some we can use some DES, that digital encryption standard, triple DES, double AES, or DES, or AES also, right? That advanced encryption standard also you can be used in that particular private WAN, right? So this particular private WAN will be ideally actually it will be suitable for the enterprise which having some moderate growth of the expectations, right? Because when relatively a few new branches or remote offices will be deployed over the coming years, so for with respect to the future scope or future expansion of that particular organization, you can be go for this particular private fan, right? Because if you see, the business will be require secure and dedicated reliable connectivity, right? So work for 24/7, right? And it also support for the advanced applications such as the voice and video, right? And benefit, and it will be also taking benefit from that particular encrypted private connectivity, whichever I am whichever I have told you right now, right? So however, the technology which will be result in this particular relatively high recurring monthly carrier fees, right? So which it is not the preferred technology for extending this particular connectivity to tele workers, or we can call as a remote call agents, right? So this particular enterprise might encrypted private connectivity to the network, right? And this particular to it will be connect to the remote users and the smaller site as well, right? So okay, then we have then ISP service, right? So side to side and remote access and IPsec VPN, if you see the right. So all these technologies will be take advantage of the ubiquity of this public and the private IP network, if you see, right? So and also it will be also using all these particular encryption standards, right? So what we have mentioned in this particular private WAN also, right? So like the DES, triple DES or AES, right? So all these kind of the encryption standard, it can be used for giving the security over encryption part, right? So all these make all these particular WAN options will be more secure than the traditional which will be we are using private, right? And make it compliant with all the many new information security regulation which will be imposed on government and the industry group, right? So whenever you are going to implement all these particular over the public internet, right? So this IPsec VPN will the best suit for this particular business will be because it will be require very basic data connectivity, right? So it will be very much used. And if you see what are the voice and the video will be required, right? So required by the advanced application, right? So this particular IPsec VPN should be implemented over service providers private network, right? So whenever there is a level of QoS can be maintained, right? So quality of service can be maintained with respect to that, right? So this will be the very much useful, we can call, in terms of your architecture component, right? Then we have the SP MPLS and IP VPN, right? So service provider MPLS, if you see the network based IP VPN, if you see, right? So it will be similar way if you see the private connectivity with respect to that, and also the flexibility, scalability, and all this particular QoS parameter, right? So to any nature for of this particular MPLS enabled IP VPN, if you combine with its QoS for voice and video traffic, what we can call for that particular advanced application, right? So it will be giving you very much high growth expectations, right? So that there many branches or many remote offices can be added over in the future with respect to the future expansion, if you see, right? And also this it will be having some more security, reliable connectivity, and relatively though if you concern with the fees, right? So it will having a very lower carrier fees also, right? So it will be a good choice for the business to use this particular SP MPLS and the IP VPN, right, in all the way, right? And then the last one is self-deployed MPLS, if you see, right? So it will nothing but a network segmentation technique, right? Which will be allowing enterprise to logically segment the network, right? And the self-deployed MPLS we can reserve for very large enterprise, right? For the service provider which we are going to use, right? So we that may make this particular significant investment in that particular network equipment and the training, right? And therefore the particular IT staff needs to be comfortable with the technical complexities whatever they have in this particular self-deployed MPLS, right? So in order to that also we are going to use in this particular enterprise WAN and WAN architecture technologies if you concerned, right? So then we will have some of this particular comparison with this particular Cisco enterprise WAN and WAN architecture if you see, right? So in this comparison I will be showing you all these particulars WAN and MAN architecture technologies, is private WAN, ISPs, SP, MPLS and VPN, and this particular self-deployed MPLS, right? So with respect to this particular secure transport, right? So how the security can be maintained in this particular technologies, right? And then the high availability, what the status of the high availability in this particular technologies, then voice and video support, the multicasting approaches should available or not, right? The scalable network growth is there or not, right? And what about the shared WAN links in between all these architecture technologies are there, right? So with respect to that we have compared all these things, right? And also if you see the operational cost, what it exactly in this particular thing, then network control over the, and if you wanted to migrate from private WAN, right, then what are the different options or in which you are going to migrate, right? So on the basis of that also I have listed out here some of the points, right? So if you see here you can easily understood that through which WAN and WAN architecture technologies you wanted to shift, or you wanted to migrate, or you wanted to use for your particular organization, right? That you need to decide it by yourself, right? By seeing all these things, right? So these are the some parameters you need to be considered while selecting any kind of this particular WAN and MAN architecture technologies if you concerned, right? So this is these are the nothing but the sum of the comparisons chart over here, right? So by which you will understand easily which one is the best suited for your organization if you compare with this WAN and MAN architecture technologies is concerned, right? So that's it for today's session, right? So we will stop today, right? In next section we are going to start with our this 4.5 and 4.6, right? So that is selecting enterprise edge components and enterprise branch and deliver condition, right? So these two topic is remaining for this particular chapter, right? So these 2 points we will finish it in our next session, right? And then we will end up with this particular chapter number 4, that is designing our remote connectivity, right? So that's it for today's, right? So there will be no test for today, okay? So in the next session we will start with a new topic, right? So thank you for all of you for joining this particular lecture. Thank you.